Good afternoon. Welcome to The Big Show. I am Paul Zeise. It's The Big Show that we do every single day. And, of course, I had a couple of people ask me, hey, are you still going to do this and everything else? Yeah, I guess I should let you know that last week I had a family emergency, so I was off last week. That's the only reason we didn't do the show. But the show will go on tomorrow. I know that we will have full draft coverage from, starting at 7 o'clock every day. And I will be jumping on there at some point and through the night as the Steelers get closer to drafting. Of course, the draft now is we are basically in the final stages of everyone putting together their boards, everyone putting together their ability to try and make their team a lot better. So now it's one of those things where all of the talk is pretty much over. Not quite, but for the most part, it's over, right? And I think that, it's important to note that a lot of it is just talk. As we, laid out yesterday, I think the most important thing to remember is that much of what you're hearing when it comes to the Steelers and the draft and every other team in the draft, it's basically a lot of self-serving, just sort of people putting out information and trying to throw people off the scent. Mike Tomlin actually even said this the other day when him and Omar Khan met with the media. Mike Tomlin said, you guys watch me when I'm at senior day and, senior at the Senior Bowl, and you watch me at pro days, and you really watch to see who I'm talking to. And I know that. And so, there's times when it's kind of fun just to mess with you a little bit, and I'll talk to somebody just to throw you off the scent because it's a game of cat and mouse that every team is playing. But understand, it's not just every team. It's every single agent that's out there. And so you have agents playing the game. You have some players playing the game. You have teams playing the game. So at the end of the day, you have a lot of information just kind of thrown at you. You really don't necessarily really understand what's going to happen until it actually happens. And I think that's the thing. It's fun to talk about all the speculation that's gone on. It's fun to talk about these things, but reality is a lot of it is just sort of hot air. And so I feel like, we're at a place right now where you sort of have to sift through all this stuff to kind of figure out where and when the reality, the real stuff is actually happening. And so, I think that with the Steelers, as we said yesterday, I think it's very clear that there's a few things that are very clear about the Steelers when it comes to tomorrow and, through the weekend, the draft. And one of them, I think that is the most clear, regardless of all the different ways they're talking and, the stuff they're throwing out there, is that they are absolutely going to end up with a quarterback by the time, Saturday at 4:30 or whatever time it is that the last picks are made. I would be willing to bet they're going to have a quarterback in their stable, someone they drafted. Now, we can sit here and talk all day about who that's going to be. I know there's, been a lot of smoke or fire or whatever about Shedeur Sanders and Jalen Milroe. Those two seems to be the guys that the Steelers have been most connected to. But I think the other thing you got to remember, though, when we talk about the quarterbacks, is that those two guys might not be on the board when the Steelers pick. So it's nice to speculate that these are the guys they're going to draft. These are the guys they're going to, whatever. But the reality is we don't know who they're going to draft because we don't know who's going to be picked ahead of them. We don't know about some teams. And, of course, I read yesterday, there are sleeper teams out there that might basically be willing to, trade up because they want to try and get one of the quarterbacks, and that would change what the Steelers are trying to do. There's been a lot of speculation, maybe even more than speculation, because this is, again, these are some of the things that have been put out there, and you just have to take it with a grain of salt, that the Steelers might trade back. They might actually trade out of the first round. we could be sitting here talking tomorrow night, when I jump on with those guys, and I think it's Adam and Jason Mackey and Chris Dell will be, anchoring the show. But we could be sitting here talking about them not having a pick. That could be a reality. Maybe they trade back into the second round. I said it yesterday. If Jalen Milroe, the third quarterback, is already off the board when they pick, and maybe, two of those defensive tackles are off the board, then all of a sudden, guess what? The Steelers might trade back. But I'm going to leave this out here for you, and you can decide what you want to take from it or not. And that is those stories of the Steelers wanting to trade back were quote unquote leaked or whatever by a couple of guys who I know probably their source was either Art Rooney or Omar Khan. And you have to ask yourself this. Is Art Rooney and or Omar Khan, are they in the business of showing their hand before they do something? And I could go back, a bunch of different examples and tell you they're not. So I'm not saying they're not going to trade back, but I would be very, very careful just from the standpoint of if you think about where they're at and what they're doing, okay? I just don't see them showing their hand that much that we can sit here and just say, well, yeah, this is definitely what they're going to do. I feel like that's what you look at when you look at this pre-draft stuff. And I'm going to give you a great example, okay? I'm going to give you a great example, okay? Do you remember when Kenny Pickett was, Kenny Pickett was among the quarterbacks that was going to be taken? Remember, it was Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett and Matt Corral and who was the other guy I'm missing? I'm missing another guy. There was like 4 or 5 quarterbacks, and it was like this Desmond Ridder. These are the guys that are there. Now, number one, Mike Tomlin and company spent a whole lot of time with Malik Willis. And if you remember the video from his pro day where he throws the ball like, I don't know. He throws the ball like 90 yards down the field, and Mike Tomlin is like seen just, in awe on the sidelines, like, wow. And then there was all kinds of discussions about, oh, boy, Mike Tomlin loves Malik Willis. This is who they're going to draft. And then there was a story that came out, I want to say maybe a week before the draft, maybe 2 or 3 days before the draft, that said basically, according to sources, the Steelers had, quote, no interest in Kenny Pickett. Do you remember that? They had zero interest in Kenny Pickett. Well, number one, it turned out after the fact, you know what? They had probably very little interest in Malik Willis. They kind of were intrigued by his athleticism, and they were kind of intrigued by, his arm strength and some of his tangibles, but they just didn't think he was that good of a quarterback. And quite frankly, he wasn't. And he hasn't been. So they were right about that. But my point is, before the draft, they would have you believe, my goodness, they would have you believe that, hey, this, honestly, is one of those things where Malik Willis is the guy they're going to get. That's what I would tell you. So I feel like, they threw a little smokescreen out there for people. Well, we have no interest in Kenny Pickett. We have no interest in him. Turns out they probably shouldn't have had interest in him. But it's clear they did have interest in him and that they wanted to draft him. And I bring that up because I'm telling you, all this stuff we've heard for 3 or 4 days, I don't know how much of it is relevant. I kind of feel like they want to go out and get one of the top quarterbacks. But regardless of that, they're going to get a quarterback. They're going to get a quarterback, right? No matter what. They're gonna draft one. And you know what? We'll see if it's the guy that basically is they're going to be their guy of the future, or if he's just sort of a guy they're taking a little bit of a flyer on and hoping that he can become their guy of the future. But let's look at who are the guys. Cam Ward, without a question, is the number one quarterback. I think Tennessee already told him they're taking him with the first pick. So let's not even talk about him because it doesn't matter. Shedeur Sanders. What's hilarious is he was the surefire number 2 pick. Now we hear he might be a second rounder. Now we hear he might be on the board when the Steelers pick. Now we hear he might, but here's the thing again. You've got to keep it all in perspective. And the perspective I'm going to give you is that a lot of people are putting a lot of stuff out there. Some probably because they want to try and create a situation of where, maybe some teams that were thinking about taking him decide they're not going to. That isn't the case. It's not how it works, but they do it every year, all of this stuff, right? Some people aren't sold on Sanders' arm strength. Some aren't sold on even his athleticism. Some aren't, some aren't sold on the way he conducts himself and carries himself. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why teams might pass on him, but he seems to be the consensus number 2 quarterback on the board. There's a lot of different people who have a lot of different opinions about him, and you know what? It doesn't make sense. Interestingly enough, a lot of the people have Jaxson Dart actually ranked ahead of Jalen Milroe. Jaxson Dart, obviously from Mississippi. He's got a pretty good accurate throw. He's got a little bit of athleticism, wiggle room. He wiggles, able to wiggle a little bit more than you think. He's probably one of the better throwers in this thing. He's got reasonably good arm strength. The question about him, he was in one of these system offenses where, he wasn't asked to read defenses. He wasn't asked to do a whole lot of stuff. Jalen Milroe, we've talked about a million times over and over. Tyler Shaw from Louisville, we've talked about a lot. He's the kind of guy that I think the Steelers might actually end up with. I could absolutely see, despite him having a first or second round grade, him sliding into the third round. And if he does, he's the kind of guy that the Steelers, might take a flyer on. Now, here are some of the guys that are out there that the Steelers might be able to get later. Quinn Ewers from Texas. I have no interest in Quinn Ewers. I don't think he's very good. I know he was the number 1 kid coming out of high school. I know there was all this hype about him. I know he was Texas's guy. If I'm not mistaken, I think Texas got all the way to the national championship game this year, didn't they? They were at least in the Final Four. I can't remember. Again, so much has happened since then. But clearly the kid's a winner. I just don't think he's that good. I think that Texas probably had a much better chance of winning the championship if they'd have went with the Manning kid. Will Howard, he's the quarterback of the best team in the country. He's got some size. He's a little bit athletic. I don't know that he's not Kent Graham, but I don't know that he's, even like Ben Roethlisberger when he was young. His arm strength is what really has him. People have him, dropping down their boards just because he doesn't have a big arm, and for a guy his size, I think he's like 6'4", 6'5", or whatever he is. I think he's the kind of guy, if he's not a drop back passer that can throw the ball down the field and all that other good stuff, boy, I'm not sure I'm really all that excited about him either, but he's a guy who could develop because of his size. He does look the part and everything else. I don't know. The guy that Will Howard replaced at Ohio State is Cal McCord from Syracuse, who had an incredible year. He intrigues me. He does. He put up big numbers at Syracuse, by the way. Big numbers at Syracuse. And he intrigues me in a lot of different ways. It scares me that one NFL, I'm reading this right now, one NFL exec said he's kind of a game manager. He can be an accurate passer, not elite in terms of his vision and decision making. A little bit slow with his release, but he's 6'3" and got enough in athleticism. He can move the chains for you. Quite frankly, he sounds like a poor man's Mason Rudolph without the deep throw. Dylan Gabriel from Oregon. This kid is 35 years old or something. No, he's not. But I mean, he was at how many schools? He started at least 5 years, different places. And obviously he's not very tall. He's limited in what he can do. He's obviously the most experienced. If you want to tell me that he's maybe the most experienced guy that's there and most ready to play, I don't know. But these are the kind of guys, this is probably the zone that the Steelers are going to be drafting somebody from. Riley Leonard from Notre Dame is ranked number 10. There's not a whole lot I've seen from him that would excite me. They call him a developmental guy. He's got size and all that other good stuff. Then there's some other guys. Curtis Rourke from Indiana. Max Brossmore from Minnesota. He's smallish. Cam Miller, North Dakota State. I think we figured out that those small school guys are tough to really turn into really good players. Graham Mertz, he's another guy. He transferred a bunch. He's another 6-year guy. He had some injury stuff. Tommy Mellott from Montana State. I mean, I don't know. Seth Hennigan from Memphis, another guy that started 4 or 5 years. I mean, if you're going to take a flyer on a guy, I think you got to take a flyer on a guy who's young and whatever. So Donovan Smith from Houston, I guess people have him, as maybe a free agent, unsigned free agent. This is who we're talking about. When you talk about the Steelers, this is who we're talking about. So I think that's the key. If you ask about it, that's that list I just read off. That's probably where the Steelers are going to try and get a guy. If they can't get one of those top guys, you know what? They're probably going to go out and get one of those other guys. Here's the other thing. I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens with George Pickens. We haven't talked about this enough. But George Pickens is a guy who's in the last year of his deal. He's made it pretty clear he wants big money. Also, hasn't made it clear, but some of the things he said makes you wonder, might hold out this year to get an extension. And you just paid $30 million a year to DK Metcalf. I honestly do not see the Steelers paying 2 receivers $30 million each. It's just not their style. It's not the position they're going to do that for. It's just not how they do things, ever. They never do things that way. And so to me, I think it's really important to note that this could be something that happens. The Steelers could actually move George Pickens. There hasn't been a lot of discussion about it. In fact, what we've heard from, some of the people that have quote unquote sources is this. Guess what? Pickens is going to be a guy who is going to be, part of our plans and all the other stuff we've heard. Okay. If that's the case, then what are we saying? They might be doing another smokescreen. Period. And most of the people with sources will tell you, they're not going to trade George Pickens. He'll be here. Again, how many times have they or will they pay $30 million a year to 2 receivers? They just don't operate that way. They never have. And they won't. It doesn't make sense for them to do that. They don't like to do that. So, again, I look at that and I basically say, you know what? We can sit here and speculate all we want about George Pickens and where he fits. But the reality is, George Pickens is a guy that wants a lot of money, who's in the last year of his deal. And they just spent a bunch of money on another guy. So you can't pay DK Metcalf $30 million, then come back to the table and say to Pickens, well, we think you're worth 20. I don't even know they'd pay $50 million for two receivers, much less 60. And Pickens sees what all these receivers have signed for. He knows what all these guys are getting. He knows how much money's out there for receivers. So he's not going to just take a team-friendly discount. I think that's one thing we can all agree on. He's not. People keep asking about T.J. Watt. I'm going to say this one time and one time only. If it were me, I would be trading T.J. Watt. That's me. I've said that for 3 years. I've said that he's got the kind of body type where he seems to wear down. He gets beat up. And because of the way he plays, he's very violent. He hits, you know what I mean? And he's always constantly having collisions, essentially. And by the end of the year, he's worn down. His body's beat up, and he's almost a non-factor when it comes to the playoffs. So my thing there is this. He's still worth a lot. There's still value in trading him. That being said, he's not going to be traded. They're going to sign him to an extension. You know, and I've heard people say, oh, well, they can't do that until they figure out what's going on with Aaron Rodgers. That's not true. They've got a lot of money under the cap. And here's the other thing. They can sign T.J. Watt tomorrow. It wouldn't change the money they have allocated that they could sign Aaron Rodgers with. And we've seen how many times every single year where Omar Khan and company just basically have a bunch of guys restructure their deals so that they can make sure that they have the money they need to sign whoever they want to sign. Period. And I think that's, the thing about T.J. Watt, this thing with Rodgers isn't holding up. It's not holding up, what they're going to do with Watt. It isn't. They could sign Rodgers and still sign Watt. They could sign Watt first and sign Rodgers. That's neither here nor there. I would trade Watt. They're not going to trade Watt. They're going to give him a 3-year extension. I guarantee you what they'll do is they'll rip up this last year of his deal and give him like a 3-year extension. So it'll be this year, next year, so it'll be, 25, 26, and 27. I'm almost positive that's what his deal is going to be. It's not going to be 26, 27, and 28. It's going to be, all right, we're going to rip up the last year of this deal, restructure it in a way, where it's salary cap friendly, and we'll give you the 38 or 39 or $40 million or whatever it is that, the top guys are going for now. I know that Myles Garrett got his money. I know that Micah Parsons got his money. There's just those are the guys that set how much that position is worth. And Watt obviously can walk to the table and say, well, this is what they got. And you know what? My numbers are better than all of them. So they're not going to trade T.J. Watt. They're not going to, there's no danger of him leaving. He'll finish his career here, just like Cam Hayward. Cam Hayward, this might be his last year. I think he's got one more year after this on his deal. If he plays well enough this year, they'll bring him back for his last year. But it's pretty clear, that they need a defensive tackle. And we've talked about that as well. I mean, this draft, they have 4 positions they need to get. Okay? They don't have a second-round pick. But let's just say DK Metcalf was their second-round pick because that's what they traded, right? So they got a receiver in the second round. But they need to get a quarterback, a defensive tackle, a running back, and a cornerback. The running back can come last. They could, again, if they decided to do it, they could trade back into the second round, maybe get an extra pick, and then they get the defensive tackle they need, the quarterback they need, the corner they need, and a running back. But those are the positions they need. Those are the ones that are a priority. Those are the ones, if you look at and say, they really, really are going to go after. Yeah, I believe that. I do. I think it's important now, though, for them to figure out what their plan is for the quarterback of the future. Aaron Rodgers is irrelevant. But what is your plan for the quarterback of the future? And if you decide that one of these guys, from that list of about 18 that I named, if you decide one of those guys could be your guys, then you try and go get that guy. But I think that when you look at the totality of this draft, by the time it's over, what you're going to have is probably a Steelers team that's got some depth for their secondary, a Steelers team that's got a young quarterback, Steelers team that probably has some depth for Jaylen Warren at running back, and maybe even Cam Hayward's replacement. Because ultimately, maybe they don't have to trade back from the first round, but maybe they have to trade up from the third round to go get the defensive tackle they want, or go get the quarterback they want, or go get whatever. So there's a lot of possibilities tomorrow. But again, most of what we've heard is BS. And it's self-serving BS, which is why I'd be very, very careful with this new line of, well, it's pretty clear they're going to trade back and all that other stuff. Maybe, maybe, but that's just the way it goes. I think that they could stay where they're at. They could trade up. But ultimately, I'm going to give you my thoughts. I think that their first-round pick is probably going to be Jalen Milroe. That's my guess. I think Sanders and Ward will be off the board. I think Milroe will slide to them. And I think if he's on the board, that's who they'll take. They'll have a choice between him and Dart. I know we've heard a lot about them, liking Dart. It feels to me like Milroe will be their guy. And so, we'll see what happens. Again, a lot can happen. They could trade back. They could decide they didn't want, any of the guys that were available, yada, yada, yada. So it's going to be a really interesting night tomorrow night. By the way, the game's always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's on Carson Street. Archie's, home of 80-cent wings, Monday through Thursday, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. So get down to Archie's, enjoy yourself, have a good meal. Always have a good time when you're at Archie's. Real quickly, switching gears, the Pirates won last night. They had 18 hits, to which I would tell you, I'm thinking to myself, hey, can we save some of these? Because they have too many games where they have 3 hits. They had 18 hits, and I think one of the biggest things about it is that Andrew McCutchen was really good last night, and Tommy Pham was really good. They combined for 5 hits, and McCutchen had a big 3-run homer that kind of broke open the game. The only reason I bring that up is because those are 2 of their old guys. And I'm not sure that, it's you want every single night for those guys to be among your best hitters, which it's been in many ways. I don't know that that's the best way to go about business. The reality is, the Pirates have a lot of holes to fill now in their roster, in their lineup. They're hoping they're going to start getting guys healthy and all that other stuff. But I don't know. I look at all the guys that are talking about getting healthy, and outside of Jared Jones, who, by the way, is a pitcher, I just don't know that there's a whole lot of other guys to really feel all that good about. The other thing is, if you think about where they're at right now, Andrew Haney goes tonight. He's been pretty good for them. Then tomorrow night, Carmen Majitsky goes, not very good for them. So, and then they've got to go play against the Dodgers in L.A., which is probably never going to be an easy assignment. So anyway, I think that, when you look at the Pirates, you hope that some of the young guys continue to hit or get better or find some they find some of these younger guys, find a little consistency, because again, if it's your old guys that are performing, that doesn't really speak very well of your future. That's just the way I look at it. Anyway, that's just me. Like I said, we will have the draft show tomorrow night. Tune in, have a good time watching it. I'm sure there will be plenty of things to talk about. And, of course, it's entirely possible we won't be talking about a pick tomorrow. But my gut, I know everybody else is saying they're going to trade back. My gut tells me they're either going to stay put or move forward.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.